Welcome to Larry the Alchemist. And on today's episode, let's discuss how computers and technology have been good for music. And I'm going to approach this from two angles, from the side of the musicians and the bands and the side of the fans and the consumers. It's pretty common here on my YouTube channel, other YouTube channels similar to mine, because my channel appeals to a certain age demographic, people roughly around my age, 45 to 55. And we grew up with physical media. We grew up before the internet. We grew up before digital recordings and stuff like that, before streaming, before MP3s, before all that. And so it's pretty common for us to sit here and get angry and say, back in my day, things were better. It was so much better when you had to buy everything, when it was all physical, before the internet and before all that stuff. And I just thought it would be fun to do and I'm going to do two videos here. I'm going to do how computers and technology have improved music listening and music making, and how computers and technology have sort of ruined music making and ruined it for the consumers and ruined it for the bands. But let's start off on a positive note, shall we? So where I think the obvious positive is you take it from this. Let's take it from the side of the bands and the musicians first. I was thinking of this the other day, that I remember growing up, there was a local band that self-financed their own album. And I remember talking to the guy who managed this band, and he said how all the guys in the band had borrowed money from friends, family members, they had investors, and they spent $30,000 to record a full-length album. And this is back, we're talking 30 years ago, 35 years ago. So in today's money, that would almost be double that. And I thought to myself that, now the good thing about that is that it created a barrier for you to invest that kind of money. You had to have something going on. You had to have something that somebody believed in, or a group of people believed in, to help give you the money for that, or you were out playing and working enough that you were able to make money off of this. In that particular band, they made a really, really great sounding record. But back then it was expensive. It was difficult. There weren't as many studios. Studios were expensive to go into. It required a lot of time, a lot of effort. The bands had to, you had to do things yourself there. You couldn't fix things with the computer. You couldn't edit the way you edit now. So the plus side of having the technology that we have today is that barrier, that you may be a really great band, but you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to go in and record a record. Probably back then in the 70s and the 80s, there were probably a lot of really great bands that just could never get the money together to go in and make any kind of proper recording. So that barrier has pretty much been lifted. You can make a good to excellent recording with a MacBook with almost free programming, with buying a couple interfaces and just a couple simple things. You can be up and running and recording yourself. And so it eliminates that barrier of people who don't have the money or the resources, or maybe they lived somewhere where there weren't studios that they could go into to record. That has eliminated that. We'll talk about the negatives when we get to the negative video. We're staying positive here. And it also allows you then to distribute and get your music out to everybody in the world. I mean, that's a really, really amazing thought. I mean, if you're around my age or older and you remember before the internet, the thought of being able to record a song and minutes later have it available to anyone in the world would have been mind-blowing. You would have never have believed it. It was a complicated procedure back then of distributing things and finding someone to distribute it for you and to back you financially to do all this. Now you can record on your own computer in your garage with your friends, and you can load it up, and an hour later it'll be on all the streaming services and available to everyone in the world. And that's a pretty cool thing. If you're somebody like me, I've talked about how I like digging up old bands and stuff like that. And I know that there's some of these bands from the 80s that couldn't afford to release something, couldn't find a record label, that went and just released it themselves on the internet, maybe on YouTube or on the streaming services. So that's pretty cool that there's no barrier, there's no record labels holding people back, there's no financial barriers, there's no limitations holding anybody back. As a musician, you can make your own music, you can get it out there to people. You don't have those roadblocks that people had in the past. Now, for the consumer, I think where technology in computers is good is for the same reason. It opens up access to everything. And I know that, again, people my age that were there before the internet and all that stuff often say you appreciated things more when you had to pay for it yourself. And I 100% agree with that. But if the 10-year-old, 12-year-old me could have paid $10 a month or convinced my parents to give me a streaming service where I could have had everything right there, I would have done that without thinking. Because all I wanted was to hear music. Yes, it made me appreciate it more because I had to work to get it. It was hard to find certain things, but there's no denying that it's pretty gosh darn cool when you sit back and you think that I can just grab my phone and have access to just millions and millions of songs. I can jump on YouTube, discover all these bands, catch all these live performances. It's pretty crazy. I mean, we sort of take it for granted now because it's become such a accepted part of just the way things are now, sort of this instant access. But try to put yourself back in your mindset of when you were just discovering music. And if you were doing that before the internet, how exciting this would have been to be able to have access to all this stuff. And then I would say another thing is that the computer and the internet and technology also breaks down, I think, the barriers between the bands. And I think this is good for the bands. The bands can get direct access to their fans. And for the fans, they can feel like they have some kind of connection to their artists. They can stay in touch with their artists. In the old days, you had to join a fan club or you had to read about it in a magazine or something like that. And information traveled very, very slowly back then. Now it's just instantaneous, and you can follow your favorite artists. You can engage with them. You can just be way more in touch with your favorite artists, and your favorite artists can be way more in touch with their fans. So this exchange of information and connectivity, I think, is a really cool thing. So, okay, there's some things that I would say are positives about modern technology, computers, and the internet and everything. I know that there's some negatives out there, so let's keep this going positive. Let's not get negative here. Let me know what you think are some of the positives of modern technology, the computer and the internet. How are some things that you think that we have today that you think you would have loved to have had when you were younger, first discovering music? Let me know in the comments down below. Till we see you again, make sure you rock hard, art free.